I don't know about that. I don't know about that. Thank you. Yeah, thank you everybody for coming and your interest in snow melting and our business and potentially purchasing a melter or contract melting or for any reason that you're here. Just again, thank you so much for the interest. Who's running my slides? Is there a little? Maybe this will work. Yeah. Do you mind? Yeah, I think you're gonna have to do this for me, buddy. Okay. So as Carolyn said, we're a contractor here in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, and we've been melting snow now for 4 years, 5 years, 4 or 5 years. Anyway, I checked today. We have just under 2,000 hours on the melter that you see here, this 1800. So I think we probably have more melters on an 1800 than I think anybody in the country. We've also got a ton of hours on our new 580 that we got last year. And so we've got a lot of experience in melting, and I'm excited to share kind of our experiences and what we've gone through this process over the many years with you. Andy? One of the reasons why we looked at snow melting was because of some of the struggles that we were having with traditional snow management methods. Everybody knows how we've managed snow in the past and still currently manage snow. Piling snow on site, snow hauling and relocation on site, snow blowing, and of course snow hauling off site. A lot of those traditional ways of managing snow. Next, please. Why we considered melting snow. So many dump sites in the Twin Cities are going away. We used to see, we used to have the ability to dump snow in the river. Pretty much hide snow and tuck snow anywhere you could. You could dump snow. Now there's so many different environmental issues that play a part in where we can handle snow, where we can dump it, where we can move it. The other things is a lot of these vacant lots have been purchased and bought up. So as our urban area gets larger, as parking restrictions get more contentious, it becomes more of a need to manage snow in a much different way. So that's why we started looking at some of these options. We started to get some pressure from our clients to reduce relocation costs. When you start to haul snow and manage snow in a lot of the traditional ways, you're touching snow so many times. You plow the snow, you put it in a pile, you load it in a truck, you haul it in a truck, you dump it on the ground, you now take a dozer or a loader and you stack it up and push it up. Every time you touch that snow, that incremental cost goes up. So we really were looking for a way to show our clients some efficiencies and cost reduction in how we could manage and eliminate their snow. Environmental concerns from the MPCA. A lot of times, snow is in places that it doesn't belong. So as the PCA gets more involved in snow management and chloride management and how we're handling these snow dumps and these snow issues, there's a lot of increasing pressure on what's going to be the future of how we can handle this. So we wanted to really kind of lead our business and lead the market and say, we think there's some better ways to manage snow. Let's be able to melt it, do some filtrating, and look at putting the water where it belongs in the storm sewer systems and not letting these snow piles melt and having all this debris everywhere and potentially this water that's filled with chlorides getting saturated into the ground. Liability management. As we all know, one of the biggest things especially in our industry, in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, is liability. So we've got all these snow piles on these sites, and especially now as we're coming into March, that snow is melting, and then at night it's refreezing. So we've got ice in the mornings. A lot of times we don't know there's ice because sometimes we're not out on those sites. If it's a blue sky sunny day in the morning, you have a slip and fall, and now our client has a liability issue with whether it's an employee or a customer, and they've got a potential loss. So one of the reasons, again, was liability management. Service diversification. We still haul snow, we still manage snow in a lot of traditional ways, but we also looked at purchasing a melter to provide some service diversification within our company. So we can now go to a client and say, you know, we have every single way possible to be able to manage your snow. And we'll look at what the most responsible and fiscally responsible way is for you and come up with a good fit. And then, you know, the other part of that was trying to create a competitive advantage in the market between us and our competitors. Very few of our competitors have snow melters. So, you know, it's nice to be able to go into a meeting when you've got, you know, 5 or 6 companies that are bidding on a site and be able to say, you know, we own these machines. A lot of our competitors will put on their, you know, their RFPs or their bid sheets that, you know, snow melting cost. Part of my proposal is come to my shop. You can see it. You can climb in it. You can run it. You can touch it. We own it. So that was one of the reasons, again, was a competitive advantage. And then we started to deal with a large client base that had ramps. And how are we handling snow on ramps? That becomes, you know, very challenging. We've got ramps that have, of course, weight restrictions and load restrictions. So how do we manage that snow and get it off there? Well, a lot of the traditional ways is you've got to dump the snow off the ramp, it hits the ground, and you load it back into a truck, you move it off site, you touch it again. It's expensive. The other thing is there's liability with that. What happens if you're dumping some snow off the top of the ramp and somebody's walking underneath of it? We've knocked cameras off the side of the building. We've wrecked trees. We've done it absolutely all in removing snow off ramps. So we really wanted to find a better way to responsibly manage snow on ramps. So those are some of the reasons why we considered melting snow and purchasing a snow melter, you know, when we did. How we use our big machine, our 1800. Large shopping centers, large corporate campuses, events. We've been on the Super Bowl for last year in Indianapolis. They wanted some potential snow melter to go down to the Super Bowl in case they had a large snow event. Services needed. We'll get clients that don't need snow melting every single time it snows. They may only need it once a year. So we've got that option as well to provide it, you know, just on an as-needed basis. Contract snow melting. So, you know, sites that maybe we don't necessarily plow or service, but we bring our snow melter in and we will, you know, service those needs potentially on a contract basis. Service partners. We do have some partners in the industry that are great partners with us that plow snow, that have snow businesses that don't necessarily own a melter, but, you know, we will provide melting service for them. And then our future plans, I've got ramps in there, we've obviously accomplished that. You know, our large melter is obviously very large. You saw it out there. It's got to get pulled by a tractor. It's very long. One of the things that we're really focusing on moving forward is how we can better manage snow on some of these smaller sites. Because some of these smaller sites are in a lot worse shape than the larger sites because they've got even tighter, you know, restrictions on how they can manage their snow. You know, a centralized melting service, potentially with changes coming with the PCA, with changes coming, you know, potentially with city ordinances, the way we manage snow in the future may change. So, you know, we've talked about maybe a centralized melting location where someone could come in, you know, many companies could come in, haul snow to one spot, we could put it in our melters and melt it and handle it that way. And then, of course, municipalities, which has been not something that we've had a ton of experience with. We've done a small amount of work with municipalities, but again, as snow management changes, it's becoming a lot more prevalent for municipalities to look at this way of managing snow in their cities and towns and so on. How we use our 1800. Currently, our 1800 is pretty stationary at one of our client sites, and again, it melts 3 large ramps every time it snows, and it's been very successful. Our client that we use it for absolutely loves it. They can look outside. They're also a very environmentally friendly company, a very green company. So they look out there and they say, okay, we're not only providing a fiscally responsible service, we're also handling the snow in a responsible way. So that's an important part to what our client enjoys about that ramp melting. We have used it at smaller shopping centers, corporate campuses with space restrictions. This is also a machine you could potentially use at multi-housing complexes, apartment buildings, townhomes that may, you know, have space restrictions, and And a lot of times those type of facilities don't want snow on their turf because it damages their turf. So how do we manage that? Well, that melter is a great option for that. And then emergency services. We've actually had a couple situations that our company does some work with the MPCA, and we've dealt with some oil spills in the Twin Cities, or diesel spills. And we've actually taken that saturated snow, put it into our snow melter, melted it, separated the diesel fuel or oil off of it, sucked it off of the top, and used it, for emergency services in that way. We had a situation recently in North Dakota where we almost sent our machine and we actually couldn't do it. There was a gasoline spill, and they dumped I don't know how many 100,000 gallons of gasoline on the ground, and it was saturated with snow. That was something we couldn't do because of the flash point of course gasoline. But there are a lot of different things that you could do, with these snow melters over and above just, melting snow. Advantages. What's really nice is it eliminates the snow completely. There's no need for patrol salting, and melting and refreeze kind of disappears. So you take that snow, you push it in the pile, you eliminate it, the liability goes away, and the additional cost goes away to your client of having to show back up time after time after time and keep dealing with that potential ice. Operates at 70 decibels to allow for 24-hour operation. One of the things we deal with as snow contractors, I know Reliable deals with this all the time, is that there's so many hours in so many cities that you can't work in because of backup beepers and banging tailgates and loaders and loud trucks. So now maybe you're trying to do some of these things, during the day. Well, you talk about liability, trying to haul snow off sites where there's people all day long and these trucking convoys going in and out. So that's a challenge. Our melter operates, quieter than lawnmowers. So you're able to do that for the most part 24 hours a day and not really cause too much of a concern regarding noise and those issues. Reduced liability, much less equipment working on site. We have sites that have thousands of yards of snow that we need to eliminate and melt. You would need 15, 20 dump trucks, working in a night to be able to, manage the amount of snow we're able to melt. Well, that comes with, again, a high level of liability when you've got 15 dump trucks coming in and out 2 to 3 times an hour. So, taking those trucks off your site, again, reduces some of that liability that exists. Eliminate asphalt and concrete damaging convoys. Everybody knows that all these shopping centers and these corporate campuses, you're on asphalt and concrete surfaces. These trucks that are driving, across these surfaces are damaging that asphalt, pushing the frost further into the ground, and potentially causing, some concerns for those surfaces. So, snow melting can eliminate that. And again, you're only moving the snow one time. So it really, really cuts down costs related to, touching snow multiple times to get it into a dump site. So those are some of the advantages of why we melt snow. Environmental benefits. Our machines really are a green way of managing, these snow piles. Everybody has seen when they've driven by a shopping center, the snow pile that's there, that's got trash coming out of it, and it's black because of all the carbon that it picks up. And then also think about, all of the stuff that gets picked up as it pushes across the parking lot, and the sand and debris that ends up in these snow piles. Well, if that's left to melt naturally, all that stuff ends up into the storm drains, okay? When we melt snow, our snow dragon has a filtration system on it, has a weir system. So the majority of those chemicals, the majority of that sand, the majority of that debris ends up in our machine. Last night, I was in my wash bay and the whole thing is in there and there's piles of stuff coming out of it. It's on the ground and we're managing that. We send it to the landfill. So we're responsibly managing the debris and those type of things that come out of the machine, again, making it very green, very friendly from an environmental side. Quiet operation, as I just discussed, allows for day and night service. Greatly reducing exhaust emissions. We've got a machine that can, melt 40 dump truck loads of snow an hour. You'd need, again, like I said, maybe 15 to 20 trucks doing the same thing. Think about the emissions that 15, 20 trucks causes versus one machine melting snow. And then again, controls runoff of melting snow properly, directing in the stormwater system and not into lakes, rivers, and aquifers. So these storm drains and these stormwater systems have been designed to properly handle this type of runoff and this type of water. When we're able to direct it there, that's a much better way of managing that runoff than it is to let it just kind of go where it may. So that's some of the environmental benefits. Okay, so probably what a lot of you guys are here for, kind of in the dollar and cent side of things. I'll start this off in saying that snow melting absolutely does not make sense for everyone. And to think that just because you're melting snow, you're saving a client money is not always the most responsible way to do it. I've had many situations where, a client was going to spend $75,000 hauling snow off-site. We've been able to come in and melt snow for, much, much, much less than that because they've got a dump site that's a long way away. But I've also had the other scenario where when we first owned a melter, I had a customer that said, come and melt all our snow. So we showed up and we're 25 hours into this thing. We got this pile knocked off and I sent him a big bill. And he about had a heart attack. And I said, well, where was your dump site? He said, well, we just normally haul it behind the building. So, and in learning that, I went, boy, that was a learning experience. He never wants to talk to me again. So the way that we need to talk about this dollar and cents, of course, there's a lot of factors that need to be understood before you can make a good, responsible decision for yourself and your customer, because you don't want to lose a customer because you're potentially doing something that's not responsible. Well, we can go through this. Trucking cost to haul 500 yards of snow. 15 trucks hauling 18 yards, 2 rounds an hour, about $1,350. Your front end loader load the trucks, about $130. So your total trucking cost is $1,480 to haul that 500 yards. Now, we all know that unless you own your dump site, unless you've got some ways of managing that really the costs don't necessarily end there. So a normal addition is probably going to be a dozer that you're going to get charged for to manage that snow when it comes out of the truck and push that up. So you add another $150 an hour for that. And then you add your dump fees because, again, most of these sites, there's a fee that's a lot of times related to that, which sometimes averages about $20 a load. You guys agree with that? Back there, Sean? 20 bucks a load?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds good.
For a total, of $2,230 if you use the additions. To melt 500 yards of snow in that similar scenario, let's say you have $1,000 in the snow melter. You notice the machine that we were loading it with does not necessarily have to be a front end loader. We can load it with a smaller machine that, of course, comes with less cost. So let's just say $80 an hour for the machine. So a total cost of melting at $1,080. If you just looked at the trucking cost, you're saving 31% melting snow. If you looked at the trucking cost plus your ads, you're saving about 51%. So you really can see in kind of the dollar and cents that, if the scenario is right, you're hauling the snow at distance where it physically is much more responsible to melt snow, that you can see you can, again, save your client money. Go to the next slide, I'll go into the next part of it. So this dollar and cent summary is, the average cost compared to trucking ranges about 30 to 65% in melting snow. And where I get the 65%, we melted snow 2 years ago in Chicago. And when they had that 25 inches of snow. And we came in there, and there were some areas in Chicago that they were hauling snow 2 and 3 hours away. And they got a bid from a contractor to haul the snow off this site in Skokie, Illinois, and it was going to cost them $125,000. We brought our melter and we melted all the snow on site and charged them $27,000. So I mean, they were absolutely smiling ear to ear because we were able to do that. So that's kind of where the high end comes from. Cost per hour on the S&D 800 ranges from $900 to $1,200 an hour. Cost per hour for the S&D 580 ranges between $300 and $450. Average cost to melt a yard of snow ranges from $2.10 to about $2.50. And average cost to truck a yard of snow averages about $3.50 to $4. So again, those are kind of a summary of some of the costs that you can expect to experience when you're melting or trucking. Service and maintenance. As we've been discussing today, service and maintenance on these things is a big deal. They're a very finely tuned piece of equipment. It's not something that you just put out there and say, run this thing and shut it off when you're done. We've learned that the hard way. We've been doing this now a long time. Again, we have a lot of hours on these machines, so we understand what that means. You need to drain and close all valves to prevent freezing when the machine's not in use. Those can freeze and wreck your pumps and really do a lot of damage. We clean our machine about every 24 to 36 hours. We've got sites at shopping centers that are extremely dirty, where we will be cleaning it much more frequently. When we did the snow melting for the TCF stadium when the dome collapsed, they were hauling a lot of snow. The snow that was coming off the field had all those little rubber pellets in it because that was what was in the turf. And we didn't really factor that in, but we were cleaning the machine every 6 to 8 hours. I mean, it was just getting full of debris. So making sure that machine is clean during peak use is important. But understand, that can take a long time. That's a long process. So understanding where you're at, what type of snow you're melting. When we melt snow on some of our corporate campuses, we can melt there for 4 days and not have to clean the machine because it's so clean. So just make sure you factor that in. The first year we had the machine, we were running it again in some very dirty operations and some snow that had debris in it. And we ended up, wrecking some seals in our pumps, and we didn't have extra pump seals. So that actually shut our machine down for a period of days where, we've got this great new machine, we can't run it because of a couple seals. So now, of course, we've got spare pump seals, and we actually have a spare pump on hand at all times with Quick Connect. So if we have a pump go down, we just slap another one in and you're going again in 20 minutes. So those are some things. We calibrate our burners about every 150 hours. And that's important because your fuel burn. I mean, these things do burn a lot of fuel. So making sure those burners are calibrated and things are working efficiently and you're able to melt as much snow as you can fast is very important. And then having an on-call mobile repair service that specializes in heating and boiler systems. Unless you know a lot about the type of burners and pumps and things that are going on in these melters, it's not something that you're just going to be able to fix in an hour with parts that you're going to get potentially at Walmart or Napa. So you're going to need to partner with somebody or really learn yourself on how these systems work to make sure that your machine's properly maintained, and if you have a breakdown, that you can call somebody and get the thing back up and running. Because we all know in the snow business, we have a window of time. It's not like concrete repair we do in the summertime where, well, if we don't get to it today, it'll be there tomorrow. Well, that's not necessarily true. A lot of times our clients need that snow pile out of there immediately, so if we can't melt it, we end up having to haul it or they end up doing something else. So you want to be able to take advantage of those opportunities when you can. Breakdowns and downtime eliminates the ability to do that sometimes. So service and maintenance is very, very important. Key points for success in melting snow. Really understanding the benefits to melting snow. There's some other contractors that are in the snow melting business that really use this kind of as a secondary part of their business and have a hard time sometimes, I think, really projecting and trying to make their clients understand the benefits and how this is a good fit for them. So really understanding the benefits is important. Evaluating the potential size of your site is important. And evaluating if it's fiscally responsible. Like I said, you can melt snow on the wrong site, and you can take a customer and turn them around and send them the other way and go, I never want to talk to you again because of the bill you just sent me. So you need to make sure that what you're doing is fiscally responsible for you and your customer. That's especially true if you're also providing service, because maybe you're the service provider on site and you recommend to a customer that, hey, I want to melt snow. Not only are you jeopardizing your snow melting, but you're also jeopardizing your service contract because you maybe gave a poor recommendation to your customer. So you need to make sure that snow melting is a good fit for not only your customer, but the site that you're working on. Having one or two key people that operate the melter and run your melting program is I can't tell you, that's one of the things that Charles and Carolyn and the Ken from Snow Dragon and Jump Dragon had said, you need to do this. So we sent our people down to Park, Ohio, sent them through all the training programs, and really dialed them into melting snow. And they're the only 2 or 3 people that even touch our machines. So that is so very important. These are not machines that you can just take an equipment operator, put it out there, fire it up, and say, call me in 12 hours when you need fuel. You need somebody that's well-trained in how these things operate to run. And then choose the right snow melting machine or contractor that best fits your needs, and make sure it's a Snow Dragon. It was just fabulous. I was standing next to a guy, well, actually, we were in Chicago, and our machine is getting melted, and this gentleman that was there owned a different brand snow melter, and he's watching this thing get loaded, and he's watching the water come out of it, and he's looking over at his machine over here, which is the same size as our machine, but it's obviously a different brand. And I think he looked at you and said, I made the wrong choice.
Yeah.
So
he was real curious. He was climbing all over it.
Yeah, and so that's really very, very important when you look at what the benefits of some of those other machines out there. And again, I'm not into talking about bad about anybody, but really do your homework, because we did, and we've seen how these machines operate and how some of the other machines operate, and they're far and above anything else we've ever operated and run. And when these are put next to, whether it's a competitor that has a different brand or there's some tests that are done, these things will stomp on the competition. So make the right decision in potentially what you're going to purchase or who you're going to contract to do your melting, because you want to make sure you're getting the best bang for your buck. And that's it. So I know I'm available for questions. Charles, you're available. If anybody has any questions, I'd love to help out, or anybody, we can answer.
Would you include in the equation for the cost? Is there fuel and everything?
That's loaded.
Loaded?
Now, that's not, that's not cost. That's what I would charge potentially a client. Okay, so I've also got profit built into that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I do. So that's fuel, maintenance, debt service if you have it, operator. Yeah, those things are built in.
Do you have a mold-in cost?
We don't charge a mobilization, but I do charge a minimum for our big machine. So we'll charge a 3 or 4 hour minimum depending on where we're going to set up the big machine and run that machine. It takes a good hour to set that machine up, fill it with water, get it up to operating temperature. But I'll be honest with you, I don't know if we've ever implemented that minimum or not, because where the big machine is showing up normally, it's a big site, so you normally have more than 4 hours of work there. I know some companies charge a mobilization, we just haven't, but I know you can, but it's just not something that we've done. And we do the same thing, for the 580. We'll charge a minimum on the 580 to just show up. If we're there for an hour or 2 hours, we'll charge 3, and hopefully that hour makes up for the mobilization. Please.
You have the cost at $900 to $1,200 an hour, but you're only charging $1,000?
That range, the cost to the customer would be between $900 and $1,200 an hour. That's not my cost.
Okay.
That range is due to, there are different scenarios that we run into. You could go to a site where they say, you're going to be here for 2 weeks, eliminating all this snow. What can you do from a pricing standpoint? We'll give them a better rate. There's also scenarios where we've operated in where the client has access to fuel. So they'll say, give us a price for the melter and we'll fuel it. So, some of those times, some of that can be, worked out where if the client's paying for fuel, obviously we're going to give them a reduction in the rate as well. So that's kind of the range. I know people are charging $1,800 to $2,000 an hour, for that $1,800. That's just the range where we've, been able to make money, been comfortable with, and I think provide a pretty good value to our customer. So.
Well, I think part, OJ, as to how price that accordingly is also the number of hours that have been put on the machine and how often it's actually being utilized. Gives us a little bit of a competitive edge from a pricing standpoint.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Did I hear, Charles, I had my notes, it was 250 yards an hour at 1080 mil? Is that what-
That 1800, it'll vary. Snow melting varies hugely on snow density.
Yeah, and I get, but I think that was your average.
Yeah, well, your average anywhere is, if you're like a 6 or 7 to 1 snow, that 1800 is gonna melt somewhere in that 325 to 450 cubic yards an hour.
Okay. And you said 100 burns, what, 100 gallons of fuel an hour?
We've seen a little bit better performance than that. I would say 90 to 95. And
Well, that's where I was getting at my question. So that 500 yards, that's about an hour and a half, 2 hours. Right there is almost 200 gallons of fuel. That's
probably an hour.
$4 a gallon.
Charles-
That's what I was just trying to figure out.
No, Charles is right. One of the things that we try to do when we're melting snow is we'll push the snow right to the machine when it's fresh and load it in there immediately. So your performance is gonna go up. We've seen 600 yards plus an hour out of that machine with lighter snow and the right temperatures. Now, I would say you're probably averaging maybe in that 450, but just to do trucking comparisons, I use 500. You're gonna burn 100 gallons of fuel melting at 500 yards of snow. Unless it's an ice cube.
Yeah.
You know, snow melting is no different than having a boiling pot of water on your stove and taking an ice cube out of your freezer and dumping it in there and watching it melt versus walking out on your deck and grabbing a fresh handful of snow and throwing it in the pot and watching it disappear. So the faster you can get at that, you know, obviously the better. I have a client a large client of mine right now that has a snow dump that's a long way away. And we're hauling snow there tonight with end dumps and dump trucks because the pile that we're moving has been there since December. And I had to move a bigger machine over there just to break through the ice. And if I were to melt that snow, I'd be doing my customer a disservice because the performance is just not gonna be there. So, but I would say that Charles is right, an average of 10 to 1 snow, 400 to 500 yards an hour is what we've seen in ours.
I think to back that up, the important thing with snow melting is you've got to treat it as a separate profit center. And I think that's one thing that OJ's done a brilliant job on. The key thing with snow melting is you want to have that melter out there, particularly the ramp top melters. That machine should be ready to roll the minute it starts snowing. And you start putting snow into that machine. There's 3 different things. Number 1, you're melting fresh snow. Number 2, you get through that site in a faster amount of time, and it gives you opportunities to move that melter for additional revenue at different properties. And I think that also when you look at the pricing schedules of how you would charge customers, you can have a top priority where client A gets the machine at the first snowfall. You might have a lower priority client who you get to 4, 5, 6 days later. And that's where you get the variance in the price.
We've also charged by the yard of snow. You know, where you've got a customer that says, well, you know, if I'm paying by this hourly rate and you guys are melting the snow so fast, you know, am I paying too much? And I said, you know what, I have no problem charging you by the yard. You know, so we know exactly what's going in, exactly what's coming out, and you know, charging them accordingly. There's been we bid on the St. Paul State Stadium when they moved all the snow out of the cities in there 2 years ago, and they had this big, huge pile of snow. And what the city was going to do was going to put a water meter on the discharge, and they were going to basically pay us by ton of water that came out of the machine, and that's how they were going to do it. They didn't end up melting the snow; they ended up hauling it away. But that's, you know, another way to do it too. So I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, no, I was just,
Sure.
my brain was spinning front
No,
of numbers, I was
absolutely.
just trying to figure out, you know, I'm looking at $800 just in fuel, but I get the whole, right away, obviously, it's gonna melt a lot faster than it's going on. The other thing is that I never really saw anything on the filtration. Is that, they talk about, you know, taking the chlorides and the oils out, Is there actually like, I seen the baskets in there?
Yeah, it won't take the chlorides out.
Okay.
So you would almost need to boil the water and do some different filtering to get the chlorides out. That's really tough. Charles, I'll let you speak to a little more on, as the technical guy, on how that weir system works.
Essentially, the weir system is a system in the rear end of the melter that basically is a screened area with a discharge tube. So as the water level rises in the melting hopper, the water that rises is discharged through the weir system. So the debris stays in the melter and the water is discharged because the weir system is encased in a filtered mesh system. We cannot, the reason we can take the oils out of the water is because the oils will sit on top of the water. But you have to have a vacuum truck there to siphon any oils off the water. We don't sell the melters or promote that we're going to eliminate oils in the melting system. That would be a specialty application which OJ had spoken to earlier in a spill where there's contaminated snow. We collect the debris, the trash. The trash will go into the debris baskets and you can empty those on a regular basis. The heavier materials like gravel, grit, and sand, those will sink to the bottom of the water in the melting hopper, and then when you clean the machine out after you drain the water, that's the material you take out and it then goes to the landfill. The same way that you would treat parking lot sweepings. Regards to chlorine removal, I can tell you right now, because Carolyn and myself looked into this a number of years ago, it's $1 million investment even for a 580 if you were going to take the chlorides out. Extremely expensive, impractical, and there's actually a gentleman here from Park, Ohio, David Hill, and that's part of your area of expertise.
Right.
So maybe you could address that, David.
In regards to, melting versus